Public or private, growing or established. Year-end can be a pretty stressful time of year, no matter the size of the organization. Sage Intacct really has an abundance of features and functionality to help streamline, organize, and ultimately help speed up a lot of those processes to make that time of year just a little bit less stressful. One of those areas Intacct helps to streamline is approvals. Whether we're talking about things like time and expense approvals, or maybe department or project manager approvals for AP and purchasing invoices, if we're doing these things manually or external to the system, this can not only slow down our close, but can also inhibit our visibility into what's out there. With things like AP and purchasing documents, if we have things floating around in people's emails or paper folders, we can miss large accruals, leading to understatement of job costs and liabilities. With Intacct, we take all that and digitize and formalize the process. We have approvals all throughout the system: vendor approvals, time and expense approvals, purchasing approvals, and more, all driven by approval policies and rules to automatically route those required approvals. Depending on the application, we have quite a few routing policies available to us, including multi-step approvals that can be built out based on organization, department, or workflow needs. In the case of purchasing, each individual workflow step could have its own totally unique approval policy. Once we get those policies in place, we can give both approvers as well as our financial teams visibility into what's outstanding for approval, with approvals included as dashboard elements, for example, as well as send notifications out to approvers alerting to the fact that we have approvals outstanding. This all leads to better visibility on a daily basis, but also that more streamlined close where we're not having to add chasing down approvals to our period end close checklist. Year-end financial audit can definitely add work and stress to what's already a busy time. Auditors, as part of their testing and audit processes, require access to a wide range of our financial data to validate our year-end balances and reporting. Oftentimes, I really don't know what they're going to need to validate those financials until we get those requests in. On top of that, as part of their regular testing, auditors are typically required to detail test hundreds, if not thousands, of transactions, depending on the audit area. This means hours of your staff's time spent pulling supporting files and backup and pulling together reconciliations to support those transactions. With Intacct, we can, based on internal policy, of course, actually give our external auditors read-only access to the system. To do this, it's actually pretty easy. So we can actually set up just a read-only auditor role by simply coming in and creating a new role, and then designating read-only privileges across the applications that we want them to have access to. With this, our auditors can now come in, pull reports for their testing selections and analysis, pull supporting attachments and backup, and ultimately answer many of their own questions, preventing your staff from spending that valuable time pulled away from their day-to-day tasks. Who knows? Maybe you can even negotiate a lower audit fee. One of those features often overlooked is actually checklists within Intacct. All organizations have both financial and non-financial processes that they, have to perform periodically and keep track of. But if we're thinking about things as routine as closing our books at period end, sometimes we need a little extra help. And so with these processes and so many moving parts, a lot of times there's some complexities that we need to keep track of. And they often involve sharing lists and spreadsheets with colleagues and communication on status, both of which are hard to have visibility into when we're doing those things external to the system. And so Sage has provided some pretty helpful features and functionality in the form of checklists to keep those processes running smoothly and to maximize visibility at the same time. And so with Sage Intacct Checklists, we can do things like assign tasks. We can clearly see responsibilities and understand the progress of your own as well as, colleagues or coworkers' tasks. Our checklists within Intacct are housed within the company application. We can see we have a December month-end close checklist here. As we come into the screen, we can see things like our header information, such as the checklist status and category, allowing us to keep our checklist organized. But let's jump in and look at our assignment section. So as we come down the rows, we can see we have a number of typical period end closing items. With our assignee column, we can designate our employee or user that will be in charge of any given assignment. When we assign a user, that employee will also receive an email notifying that they have been assigned, as well as a hyperlink to the assignment details. Now, if we come to the left, you'll notice we have these assignments hyperlinked. If we click on any one of these assignments, it'll bring us into the assignment information and details. We can see within the header section, we can easily update our status, percent complete, and even attach files, maybe a supporting reconciliation, for example, if we're talking about audit requests. Below, we'll see both constraints on this assignment as well as constraints based on this assignment. This will control the order in which assignments can be completed. Finally, as we move to the bottom, we have something called our Collaborate feed. I'll talk about this in another video, but with our Collaborate feed, users can tag other users in the system and collaborate on their assignments. Now, this was just a simple month-end close checklist, but imagine audit time when we have 30 different open items from our auditors. We're trying to keep those things organized. Where are we going to attach that support that we're going to upload to the auditors? Have there been questions and back and forth? Do we need some internal discussion surrounding what this support needs to look like? Well, all that can be housed here at this checklist to streamline that process and keep us all on the same page. So Collaborate is one of these features as well. So Collaborate is an internal social media style platform built right into Sage Intacct. It allows team members to communicate, share context, and track conversations directly within the system, right where the financial data lives. And so this feature is especially powerful during period end close when multiple departments and stakeholders need to work together seamlessly to finalize our books. During period end close, there's always numerous tasks that require team input, whether it's reconciling accounts, reviewing transactions, or maybe resolving discrepancies. Collaborate eliminates the needs for lengthy email threads, and with that reduces delays as a result of all the external back and forth. And then with Collaborate, we can also have discussions directly within the transactions or records, and all of these communications live at those records for as long as those records exist. So we can go back and jog our memories a year later if we need to. Now, for existing customers that may not have seen or heard this feature, it does have to be activated within the subscriptions, but we'll quickly walk through how we can use this. So I can access Collaborate anywhere within the system up here at the top right of any screen that we're working on. And you can immediately start conversations as well as jump into our Collaborate Center to keep track of some of that back and forth. Now, say we were reviewing a journal entry or transaction somewhere in the system. I'll just jump into a bill really quickly. Come down to the bottom and I can tag another user. So if I do bet Brandon, see, I can pull him in and send him a message. So what happens when I do send Brandon a message is he will receive an alert within the system up here in this little text bubble up the top right. He will also receive an email with a hyperlink that will bring him directly to this record. And so Brandon's not having to figure out where it is that this question originated from. He can be brought straight here. He can respond. He can upload support. And this is all throughout the system on the majority of records. And so maybe it's customer collection notes, maybe it's back and forth on those year-end close checklists, but we can house that all within the system and have visibility into it into the future. So with Sage Intacct, we have the ability to build and utilize flexible dashboards. With these, we can have as many dashboards as we want, and they are completely open to us to define which elements, charts, graphs, reports, and even approvals outstanding we want included on those dashboards. That means we can custom tailor these dashboards to an entity, a department, user groups, or even individual roles or users. Dashboard elements are able to be moved around in a way that makes the most sense visually, and adding an element is as easy as clicking on the plus icon here. Once we've defined what it is that we want included, all of these elements are real-time and on demand. As transactions and activity are posted, we can see that activity reflected within our reports. That means when it's time to do our period end close, we can have instant access to all of our reports that we've included and can look at reporting across all of our entities if we're working at the top level, as well as easily look across and produce financials across our various divisions or verticals. Once this is all set up, we have the ability to drill into any of these elements for further analysis. Our variance analysis, for example, we could instantly drill into items that fall outside of expectation all the way into our source transactions. Finally, with consolidations, we have the ability to consolidate across single or multiple base currency entities, as well as more complicated multi-level structures with varying ownership interests, all while maintaining the history of those consolidation entries for auditability within the various consolidation books for each level. All this said, we're moving away from traditional, more static reporting at the end of the month or end of the period and automating those processes to further speed up and streamline that close. One of the most basic tasks at period end is really getting our invoices in at the end of the period so we can make sure that we can get our subledgers closed timely. Sage Intacct has AP automation that utilizes both AI and machine learning to take the first pass at the coding for us. So there are two ways to actually kick invoices off into this process. We can use the upload functionality and click and drag up to 30 invoices at a time into this area here, or we can utilize the provided monitored email. So once kicked off, we'll see we have a few invoices here in draft form. If I come into that invoice record, we'll see our invoice backup is brought in automatically, and AI takes the first pass at the coding for us. Not only that, the AI is then dynamically learning with us as we go in and make revisions to those fields and dimensions. In early adopters and on the horizon for general release is purchasing automation as well. We will have the ability to utilize multiple target mappings, correct and designate alternative commitment, as well as push back to AP bills should an invoice not be commitment related. This will look to match our invoices to their related commitments and further work to streamline both our financial close as well as our day-to-day processes. So while not specifically a close process in itself, invoicing is something that takes a lot of time for a lot of teams, and that can slow down the close process, right? When we're waiting to get those things executed and performed. If we're talking about construction, progress billing, or time materials billing, or if we're talking about professional services, or we need to do some time materials invoicing, we have some functionality within Intacct to help streamline that process so that we're not having to take it external to the system, perhaps doing it in Excel. Within Intacct, we can come into our projects module and we'll see just how easy it is to perform. We could produce a progress bill. I've got one open already. See, we have our various contract lines here, and we can come through and we see our columns that we see each and every day in construction, original price, approved changes, revised total, previously billed. When I'm ready to bill against one of those lines, I can come in here and I can put in my percent complete to date. Maybe we're going to bill 35% on this line for this period. I could do the reverse as well, where we punch in a dollar amount and the reverse happens and it backs into that calculation for us. Once this is done, our output can be a traditional AIA style billing with that summary page on the front and all of our details following behind, outlining those lines. On top of this, just about all printed outputs are modifiable. They are essentially Word document templates driven by mail merge fields that we can pull out, revise, and then reload into the system. We also have the ability to have customer specific invoice templates where we can modify maybe our base or default template to those customer or client specifications, assign that template to the customer record, and have that custom template come out every single time we produce an invoice for that customer specifically. Time and materials, if we're talking about construction or even professional services, very similar process. We would come to our generate invoices area here, and we'll see as we come into that generate invoices screen, we've got posted costs and time flowing in from various areas of the system. So I've got things like my timesheets here. We could pull up that timesheet, review that entry. This one's for Jeffrey Wall. We can see all of his entries here and which projects it is that he coded to. If I come down, we have things like our employee expenses that we want to bill back, accounts payable expenses, purchasing documents, just like the time cards, we can pull those up and review those as we're going through this process. Just like the other, we can pull up an example of what that output could look like. And here we can see that output. Again, this is all modifiable. We can change this formatting. We can add additional columns. If we wanted notes to flow through from our time cards, for example, that's something that we could do, but we can automate this process. And then along with this, we can also have any supporting attachments that were living at those various cost entries compiled into a single PDF to be submitted along with that invoice to our customers. So bank feeds is one of the features we can utilize. Reconciliations, both for cash accounts as well as credit cards, can be a long time consuming process. With growing companies, obviously cash activity can grow rapidly or even exponentially. If reconciliations are done monthly, it becomes really easy for us to miss items and can also take hours to perform at the end of the month. With bank feeds and automation surrounding those, we can streamline that process, making it more easy to reconcile weekly or even daily, both streamlining our close as well as giving us a better idea of cash position on an ongoing basis. Linking an account is straightforward, and we can do that by coming into our checking and credit card accounts and coming into our banking cloud tab. With bank feeds set up, we can have Intacct pull down that cleared activity 4 times per day. With that activity, we can then create and utilize rule sets to automate a large number of both the matching activity for our book and bank transactions, as well as automate the creation of recurring activity that we see coming through. As we come into reconciliation, we can see that the bank is connected with our last bank feed date. From here, I can see the rules we've set up, both to match transactions already in the system using the match rule type, as well as create transactions not yet in the system using the create rule type. In this example, I have 7 rules to settle transactions coming through the bank. Rule 1 is a simple match between date, document number, and amount. As we come down, Rule 2 is a many-to-one rule that will match many Intacct payments to a single lump sum payment in the bank feed. And Rule 3 is a one-to-many that will look for one book item against multiple bank items. As we come down, the last 4 rules are known as create rules that require logic to be set up to create transactions for recurring activity we see coming through. Bank interest here is a good example. Rather than spending time to record manual entries, these create rules can create those transactions automatically for us. In this example, we're asking Intacct to find transactions with the description of bank interest. These are simple scenarios, and we're not limited to the rules here. We can create these rules to capture any common or recurring activity we identify within our banking activity. But this automation all helps to ensure our book and bank transactions are more closely reconciled throughout the month, as well as cut down on lengthy reconciliation times at the end of the period that slow down our close.